All right. Okay, are we ready?
All right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yay.
great. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Delegate Lily Chi, Chair of the Montgomery County House Delegation's Economic Development Committee. I want to thank you all for joining us for round 2 of our local small business briefing. It's actually economic development briefing, but this particular session follows the session we had a couple of weeks ago on tech-led economic development. And this one is particularly focused on local small businesses, which we know have weathered a lot of storm in the past couple of years, and we are here to help and listen to their concerns. I want to first acknowledge all my colleagues who are joining us this morning. Starting with the Vice Chair of the Economic Development Committee, Delegate Jared Solomon, and other committee members, Delegate Ariana Kelly, Delegate Leslie Lopez, Delegate Kirill Resnick. I also want to acknowledge several other of my colleagues. Senator Cheryl Kagan has joined us, as well as Delegate Ann Kaiser and my colleague on economic.
I'm on the committee.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, Ann's on the committee. She's just noting.
Oh, geez. What did I say? That's
But
right.
you were listing her with the folks.
Oh, that's right. I am so sorry because I kept thinking of her chairmanship on Ways and Means. And of course, she's part of the committee. I am so sorry. And my colleague, Economic Matters Committee Delegate Pam Quinn also joined us. So thank you all. And I see Ben Perry has joined us too. I will get to the guests later, but first of all, I just want to say that last year we had the 2 briefings and they were tremendously informative. I want to take a moment to thank our great partners in economic development, which is the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce for all you have done to hold our communities together in terms of job creation and helping small local businesses and the tech-led businesses. We really could not have done our job without you. We're here to listen and learn and see what new ideas we can take back to Annapolis to help advance Montgomery County's economic development competitiveness. I know we have a packed agenda this morning, but I would like to take a moment to ask my colleague, the Vice Chair of the committee, to say a few words, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I will be very brief. It's just it's wonderful to be able to work with the Chamber and with so many of our businesses. I think our hearing 2 weeks ago was really important on sort of the big issues, the sort of big headline grabbers that we see with the new biotech community, but our small businesses are really what drive our economic engines in the county. And so it's really important that we make sure that we know where our money went and how it's being used and if it was being used appropriately, and that we're doing everything we can to support our small businesses so that they can become medium and large businesses. So I'm really glad that we're here today, and thanks to everybody who helped put this together.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We have an agenda that has several items. First of all, I think we're going to have a panel of small businesses that will tell us what their experiences have been and how we can help them. And then we are going to highlight some of the summary points that we should be aware of about the new Montgomery County Comprehensive Economic Strategy that was just rolled out a couple of weeks ago. And then we'll finish with how the grants distribution process worked, because we're all eager to know, if our intent to help actually reached the people that we wanted to help and how we can improve in that process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gigi to lead the panel. Thank you. Oh, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, of course.
Thank you, Chair Lily Chi. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to also thank your co-chair, Jared Solomon. We've been working together. I'm really glad we've actually been at this for 3 years. And 3 years ago, we came to Annapolis at your invitation, and it was a terrific experience. And I think it was a great way to launch a conversation. I'm glad we did it before we had a global pandemic that changed how we were doing things. But it didn't change that we kept in touch and that we had, as our chair has so correctly stated, a year ago, we had 2 discussions, and we're doing it again this year. And so as has been said, this is our second second one. I'm Gigi Godwin, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and it has been quite a year. It's been a tough year, and I wanted to start by thanking all of our county delegation for working closely with us last year, listening to the issues that we brought forward to you throughout the year, not only in our two-part session, but throughout the session and then before and after as well, because the problems don't go away just because you're not in session. And I really appreciated that. I know our members did as well. You listened and you acted, and I want to say thank you for that before we even get started. But in the spirit of getting started, and as you've already described how we started our two parts, when we met previously, we focused on our tech companies, life sciences, our federal contracting community with Ahmed Ali, who spoke. And we think that was a good way to start and look down that path. But today, I'm really excited to bring to you two of our chamber members who are incredible business leaders. Ben Perry of Compost Crew, who just recently was recognized by the chamber at our Business Awards event as our Green Business Innovator of the Year. And he has an important story to tell about how his company has weathered the past year and a half, and also some things that would be helpful for you all to keep in mind as you enter, begin the next session. And I'm also excited to have Kevin Kies with Chesapeake Bay Roasting Company. I can't always do this for our companies, but if you haven't had their coffee, you should. So anyway, it's terrific. And I don't know if he brought any props, but I just want to make sure you recognize the logo when you meet him. And he's they're both residents of Montgomery County, but in very different kinds of businesses. So really with that, I want to just immediately turn it over to our speakers so that they can get right in and you have a chance to have a good conversation with them. Does that sound good?
Great. And I want to say, Ben Perry is my constituent, so I want to claim him before anyone else does. Okay.
That's the spirit. We love that. All right. Well, and with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to defer to you on which of our two business members you would like to invite to speak first. Thank you.
Don't play favoritism, so we'll just go down the list. Let's start with Kevin, please. Welcome. Yes.
Fine. Thank you. My name is Kevin Kies. I am a Montgomery County resident. I manage the Chesapeake Bay Roasting Company. We employ 17 people. And I should say right now we're employing about 16 people because through the course of the last year, we've been able to build back up to that number of employees. Our major customers and clients are businesses such as office coffee providers. Mostly we are a wholesaler, so we do sell to grocery stores, but we sell a lot to distributors. Often those customers are subcontractors to contractors. So for instance, for us, what the pandemic was presaged, or a year before the pandemic, we were dealing with the shutdown. And in 2019, that was when we started feeling it, was because for those first 2 months, we saw a significant drop in business because a lot of our customers are cafeterias that might be serving in, say, for instance, the Department of Agriculture or the State Department. And for us, that was a year that we had to climb out from a tough beginning. And we saw ourselves getting into 2020 with really the turnaround having happened, and we felt that things were going quite well. Our focus as a company is both on great coffee, being a member of the community and making a difference in the community, and focusing on clean water and the Chesapeake Bay. So we were really trying to push the effort of that mission going out in fair trade organic products and with a message of giving back to the Bay. But clearly, when March of 2020 hit, we were at 40% of normal. I laid off probably close to 11 people immediately, and then started bringing them back immediately because, interestingly, people are still drinking coffee. It's just that they're drinking it in different ways or they're buying it in different ways. And we had to transform ourselves to find those new conduits because we have still not seen our office coffee suppliers come back fully. They're still at about 50%. And so it's been a real challenge in shifting over to online, shifting through to grocery stores even more, and even trying to find new lines of business. I would be the first to raise my hands to say that if we didn't have the combination of federal, state, and local support, we would not have made it through June of 2020. We were that close, and the PPP, the first tranche of PPP money meant the world to us to be able to bring people back, keep people employed, and then really start to think, how can we strategize and find something new? But we also received, through the course of the last 18 months, I'd say we received about $650,000 overall, trying to find every conduit we could for both grants and even loans. So a portion of that was loans, but the state loan that was provided, which turned into a grant, was hugely helpful. Both tranches of PPP money were helpful, and even now we're leaning on the employee retention credit we've received. So it's been a real challenge, and we're back to 16 people. And I would say as a small business now, we are that close from putting our nose above the water every month. So it's been a wonderful coming back for the last 3 months, but we're still in deficit spending. And my hope is that by December or January, we'll see that come through. A couple of things that we've noticed in the course of the last year, some things that have hit us a little bit unexpectedly has been the unemployment tax hike that we received. We went from 4.8% to 7.3%. And that's pretty significant for us. Our monthly salary is about $60,000. So it's a pretty significant blow. And I would say what's while understandable, it's the speed with which we basically expected to meet that. And so I feel like if that were ramped out a little bit more slowly, that would have been better. We've also noticed a challenge in property taxes because we're a company that puts machines into customers' environments. So we have to pay taxes in all of the counties where we have brewers. And what that has meant is that for 2020, we were allowed to forego paying those taxes in lieu of paying them now in 2021. However, we've received 2 years worth of bills at once for some counties. And that's also bills that are payable within 30 days. So for us, it's kind of like been a double whammy where it's like we received a lot of help, and absolutely, I'm the first one to raise my hand to tell people, your taxes have done their job for us, that's for sure. But I feel like the aggressive nature of starting to pay back into these funds is too aggressive for us. And that's been our big challenge right now. We're focusing on product efficiencies, production efficiencies. We're focusing on our mission. And I'm eternally grateful for the fact that the funds that we did develop or we did receive have been helpful for us to strategize how we do our purchases, find local production. We've actually started printing all of our labels for our cans in Maryland. I can actually say that our can is now Maryland made inside and out, with the exception that the beans come from all over the world. But our can is made in Maryland, our label's made in Maryland, and the production process is Maryland. And that change happened through the pandemic, and we're proud of that. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much, Kevin. You made several very important points, and I loved what you said at the end about how you focus on sourcing local, because with this global supply chain breakdown, it's all the more important. We have very reliable, resilient system. But I'm going to start with my first question, and I'm going to open up for my colleagues to ask some questions.
Sure.
My committee, which Delegate Pam Queen also serves on, oversees this unemployment insurance issue. Okay, so we have been pressing the department to make all kinds of improvements, and the legislature passed some important bills to modernize the system, improve customer service and all of that. But this UI tax hike, which we have heard a lot of complaints about because it's dramatic and it's sudden,
Yeah, right.
was there adequate communication ahead of time in your mind? Because I asked them several times, and I said, "Show me where you put it on your website, how you explain to people. Do you know if all the businesses got your memo?" And what I found out was that they sent out some letter, and some of them, because a lot of small businesses use third party to pay taxes, like their accountants or something. So there was miscommunication. And when they got the bill, they were hugely surprised. Okay. Even though the state put in over $1 billion to stabilize the fund, and they adjusted the schedule and not penalize the business based on experience and all of that, but it was still a huge shock to businesses. So can you talk about how we could do better in that regard?
That's our main sources of information as a small business are to what I rely on is to what degree is my accountant paying attention to the news that's out there and in the accounting field. Is our CPA letting us know that these changes have come through? And then we do work with ADP. So that would have been where that was hit the most when we basically saw that. We did receive a letter. But that was the first that we would have known about it. We had no other way.
Did you know, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that there was also a payment schedule? One, there's deferred payment until 2022, and two, when you get to 2022, you can actually stretch it out so you don't pay all at once. Did you know that?
I didn't know that until actually I started digging into it further, but that was within the last couple of weeks that I've started knowing that myself.
Okay, we should have done a much better job explaining these things. Yeah, okay.
And I think I also go to my CPA because he sent me the link ultimately, and I read through that, but he didn't draw out to me the fact that that was also available within the link. And so I really had to dive in there. And so, as a small business runner, sometimes you're managing, okay, how much time am I going to spend on looking into things, and am I running down the wrong rabbit hole here?
That's right. Yeah.
So.
Okay, that's very good to know. It's very good to know for our committee hearings with the department and all of that to push for administrative improvements. Thank you. Yeah. Why don't we get to our colleagues and see if they have some quick questions before we get to Ben? Okay. Anyone? I don't see any hands. I hope I'm not missing any. All right, let's get to Ben, and maybe the rest of you think about the questions you want to ask. Okay, all right.
Yeah, thanks, Delegate G, and thanks Gigi for the invite. So, Ben Parry I'm the CEO of Compost Crew. For those of you who don't know, Compost Crew is a business that's based in Rockville, Maryland. I'm a Montgomery County resident as well. We are an environmentally driven business with a mission to eliminate food waste and to revitalize the health of soil to support local food production. So we're about 40 employees. We have 6,000 customers in Maryland, DC, and Virginia, predominantly in Maryland, around Montgomery County, but also up to Baltimore. About 75% of our employees are women and minorities. And we are in the process of transitioning to a public benefit corporation. So from an LLC to a public benefit corporation to really solidify our commitment to the public good. Our customers are about 50% residential, 50% B2B. And among those residential, it's single families and single family homes, apartments, renters, but also municipalities. So various municipalities around the region, including Montgomery County, work with us to collect food waste and to compost that food waste and turn that into a healthy soil amendment. So in terms of the pandemic impact on our business, so I think in general, it's important to think when thinking about the impacts, but also the solutions, there's macro effects that impact all businesses, but then also there's the impact on small businesses, locally owned businesses, and then environmentally conscious and mission-driven businesses are, have a different category as well. So, like everybody else, we were, or like many other businesses, when the pandemic hit, it was a time of significant uncertainty. We had no idea how much revenue that we were going to lose. What ended up happening is that our commercial business was impacted quite a bit. So we had dozens and dozens of clients cancel because restaurants, hotels, office buildings, you name it, they were no longer generating food waste, so they did not need our services. So our revenue dropped significantly. Fortunately, people were still generating food waste at home, and they did have disposable income, which you weren't sure of what was going to happen with that at the beginning of the pandemic. So we were able to continue to stay in business, and we weren't sunk by the pandemic initially. We did have a lot of colleagues in that were running the same types of businesses in other places that were only focused on commercial, did struggle, and they either went out of business or had to stop for a while. What really helped, and all of the things that Kevin mentioned, I'd second it. So the PPP, the economic injury disaster loan, which was a long-term, even though it wasn't forgiven, it's a 30-year loan, is at a low interest rate. I mean, that's a significant help. The Maryland loan, which then turned into a grant, was huge. And these things were not just important because of the money that they gave us, because a lot of businesses were not hit as hard as they initially thought they were going to be. But it's just the certainty that we got as a small business we were able to make decisions that were, thinking further out than the next week. We were able to look out a year or two because of the money that we got. So I think that's critically important for the benefits of those funds back then, but also looking forward, we're not out of the woods yet. And especially as a small business, and especially as an environmentally driven business, we're now competing, like all businesses, there's supply chain problems, there's labor issues. It's very hard to find the talent and attract new talent to help keep up with demand. That's compounded when you're a small business, because not only are you competing with the general economic and structural issues, but you're competing with the large employers. So we hire a lot of drivers to go and collect food waste. We're competing against Amazon. We're competing against Waste Republic, Waste Management, and Republic Services. Republic Services was offering a $20,000 sign-on bonuses to drivers. We can't do that. There's no way that a small business like ours can compete with a player like that. So I think that continuing grants or long-term loans or similar financial support to help give small businesses the certainty that they need to continue to make longer-term decisions is important. And to help us compete against these larger businesses, this would be very impactful. I don't know, is there anything else that you want me to cover, Gigi, that I missed?
We also spoke about unemployment insurance, and that sort of was a big hit for, at once, and it would have been helpful to have better communication and having that spread out as something else that you and I talked about. I do think that we had a big discussion, just for the benefit of all of our delegates and senators that are on the call, that talent attraction is a huge issue, and also competition with large companies for talent. I was taken aback when Ben said that he has to compete against public sector entities that are paying, big sign-on bonuses. And then, of course, some of the bigger companies are doing it too, but that it's both the public and private sector employer category of competition for our small businesses. I mean, that's a marketplace issue, and I don't know that there's anything that can be done about that. But just having more talent here is an issue for all of our employers, whether they're high-tech companies, biotech companies. The same is true for compost crew. And I think that this is just an across-the-board issue that touches so many other topics that I know that this, the brain trust on this call is paying attention to. Those are the key things that we talked about. The other thing we talked about was just, to the extent the state can make what Chair Chi just said recently, earlier in her comments, which is administrative matters, filing, those kinds of things. It'd be nice if those were easier for our small businesses, if they sort of synced up, with other filings so that it was less cumbersome, but it's kind of a more general topic. Those are things that I've talked to both Kevin and Ben about. And I think that we've also talked about it in this committee, those kinds of issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I second a lot of the things that impacted Kevin. The deferred Social Security taxes were definitely a smack that it's going to be $15,000 to $20,000 that will impact our hiring plans for 2022 for sure. Availability, things such as availability of trucks. I mean, just the ability to keep up with demand for small businesses is really difficult. In terms of industry specific, I mean, we're working with delegates and others to promote food waste recycling and composting, especially to work with farms and help local farms produce have higher quality soil to increase their yields and increase their profitability. I mean, that's, I think, outside of the purview of this task, this commission, but it's something that you should know that we're working actively on promoting for sure. And price incentives, I think, is really important to help environmentally focused businesses compete against those that are harming the environment. So different types of surcharges and the consumer responsibility or the producer responsibility, those type of things are very impactful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Ben.
happy to answer any questions.
Yes, I see my colleague Delegate Resnick's hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, this is a question for Gigi, because something you said I want to dig into a little bit more is this issue of red tape. That's the easiest way to talk about the filings and the processes and the inspections and all that other stuff. I feel like we've been talking about that for decades at this point. And there are things that are done, whether it's legislation or executive initiative or whatever, that is meant to improve those processes. And obviously, because there are so many of those processes, we probably focus on some, not all. Have things gotten better? And what do we still need to do? Because one of the things that I've discovered, and I get calls from constituents about cutting through red tape all the time, right? That's probably what I do more in constituent services than anything else. And I suspect most of my colleagues do the same. I've never gotten a call from a business that says, I'm having trouble with this process, or there's too much red tape. Can you help me navigate it? I've never gotten that. And granted, I don't really represent a district that has a huge business community. It's mostly residential, but it seems odd. So in addition to my other questions about whether or not things have improved or what still needs to get improved specifically, do you direct your constituents to contact us? Because oftentimes, I hate to say it, but we pick up a phone and things get better.
I'm going to take that as an invite.
Absolutely.
That's actually, the answer is yes. Sometimes we have to say, well, where are you? And let's see if we can figure out which elected official syncs up based on their committees or where they're located, that sort of thing. I mean, some of you have heard from us. Certainly, Chair Chi has certainly heard from me on some occasions. It depends on what sector our companies are in. You've heard from our breweries. I don't need to name names here, but you certainly know that there were recommendations that came from some of our, breweries, which are still a relatively new industry in the county, where they were having to send in single-spaced hard copy, documentation that didn't sync up with anything they were doing with federal, that kind of thing with federal compliance. It's just, things are out of sync. Wouldn't it be great if you could just, send in your federal and your state and your local stuff all at the same time, same documentation, for certain kinds of things. But, it's all different. And I think that's just sort of a historical holdover that nobody ever gets around to fixing. So it's just like death by a thousand cuts of a lot of little inefficient things. You can be sure, that I would pick up the phone and call you on a specific matter. We did have a member recently who had a terrible time just getting through the process of getting designated as a small disadvantaged business in order to do business with the state of Maryland. And we do hear those stories, and it's just it's months, and it seems like, how is this possible? Maryland, it shouldn't be that hard for a company to get a disadvantaged business status, just to get the status, go through, or tell them they don't qualify, one or the other. But to hold people going for 100 days, 3 months, why? And oftentimes we find out, well, the state doesn't have enough staff to manage the requests. It's that kind of stuff that we eventually somebody will tell us, that in that nature. And that really goes to a different issue, which is like, how customer service is the state oriented? How many things can really, can the members of the delegation address? Where's that fine line? Sometimes we hear, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It's the state government, and we don't ever want to put a member of ours in a position of getting an answer like, that just doesn't give them an answer. We can't tell them to just go, spin their wheels. We will go looking for the answer for them. And sometimes it's really hard to do for them. So, we do run those traps, but yes, it'd be better if the systems just ran a little more customer service oriented. And I think I think every state has room for improvement, but certainly we have an opportunity, especially with our delegation and with a question like that. I'm glad you asked it.
Well, I appreciate that. And staff is usually important. I mean, if you have good customer service, if you have enough people who are able to spend the time to provide, then we have a massive problem with staffing at the state level. I think that. But you mentioned procurement, which always perks up my ears. You know that.
I know, it's our favorite subject.
It is. And in the past, I've done legislation for you where we've allowed veterans to self-certify rather than having to go through a process. So if we are having an issue with small disadvantaged firms getting their processes in, again, let us know. Let me know. Procurement, I know it doesn't excite a lot of people, but procurement excites me. So just let's see what we can do about that and go from there.
Yeah, I'm going to take you up on that, because in this particular case, I felt like we were running the traps trying to figure out what the problems were, and that is a call I should have made to you and said, if you know this, could you know that, could you help us get to the bottom of this for this member who's just beside himself, frustrated. But yeah, I think we have some work to do there. And I also think that I'm glad you raised the issue of, we did deal with the veteran issue because of our Veteran Institute for Procurement program. I want to thank the delegation for support for our training program. But, we should also look at other categories, our women-owned, minority-owned, there are other categories. And are they, are certifications working as smoothly as they could, so that Maryland's a good place for companies that participate in those categories at the federal level. I would like to think they could participate at the state level too. So, broadening that. So, I don't know, maybe we have some more work to do. We also believe in the green business. We developed the Certified Green Business Program in Montgomery County, as you know, and we're a big fan of companies that have met that, getting, at least some special attention around procurement too, because they're doing the right thing. They're caring about the environment, and they've changed their business practices, their procurement practices. We'd love to, we think that's important across the board.
Thank
Can
you.
I also personally respond to that, because it is a big issue as it relates to small businesses. Bill Tompkins, Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. one of the challenges is that you all are legislators and not administering the laws. And I've learned that the good way, but also the hard way, that when that handoff happens, the way in which laws are interpreted and actually put into practice can be night and day, depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the agency, depending on pre-existing guidelines. And so I wouldn't expect you to get a lot of those calls because typically they're going directly to a specific department or to the small business portal for Montgomery County or to Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. And then we navigate them through not the legislation, but how to do it. Now, when Gigi talked about being qualified, let's say as a small business or an MBE, you qualify, but then you never get a phone call for procurement. And it's like deaf ears. I'm here, I've done everything, I followed the process, and then nothing happens. So I think the challenge is how do we make sure that the implementation process for legislation, that there is a smooth transition, because that's where I find that we run into the challenges. And that goes back to your point about customer service.
Well, and also, I would add something to that. At the federal level, federal agencies have the mandate of percentage set-asides, and then they have to actually meet them. They have to report their numbers, each of the agencies. And so a lot of our federal contractors, they know what kind of a pool they're swimming in. I don't know if in the state, if there are, targets, if anybody measures it, if anybody has that as a goal in certain categories. It's one thing to have a license to hunt. It's another thing, for the state to say, yes, we have targets, and our targets are, it's the difference between may or shall, in the legislative world. I know all of you live in that world.
Just to respond, Gigi, we do have targets, but they are aspirational. They are reported on, and they are never met. So yeah,
no consequences.
Yeah,
I get that. I was going to respond to Mr. Tompkins, but I think my delegate and Kaiser reacted the same way I did.
Let me get to Delegate Solomon. Unless
and if you have a comment, go ahead. I have a separate question. So
mine is just a follow-up to Mr. Tompkins, is that I wouldn't say half of what we do, but when bills aren't being implemented right and when the regulations aren't rolling out correctly, we fix the legislation and we become more explicit. So Delegate Resnick, asked originally my usual question. I ask it every year. Give us specific things to do. And while Ms. Godwin is correct, we've done a lot for the breweries and so forth. I've been hearing a lot of the same repeated red tape problems and not hearing from enough industries explicitly what can we do. So, and like Senator Kagan just put in the chat about we have a committee that deals with regulations. So if a bill's not being implemented correctly, that's a lot of what we end up doing, re-legislating.
Thank you.
Is that what you were going to say, Delegate Resnick?
I was going to say that, but I was also going to say that a lot of times, especially our legislation, but really any legislation is not being properly implemented. We do have a bully pulpit. We are not just here to write and implement laws. We are also here to make sure that the people, we are oversight to the executive. And we are here to make sure those laws are being implemented. And if they're not being implemented, we pick up a phone call, we write a letter, we send an email, we hold hearings on implementation, and we do have a bully pulpit that we use. So please do not assume in any way that once the legislative process is done, we are out of it, because we are not.
Thank you. Yeah, we're not just a call center, we're advocates too. All right, so thank you for the robust discussion. Let me turn to Vice Chair Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin and Ben, thanks for being here, and I appreciate the robust discussion as well. I'm going to claim Bill as a District 18 constituent as well. But Kevin, I just wanted to touch on, I guess, two questions. One, I really appreciated what you said about bringing really the whole process in state, because I think that's sort of the cycle we really want. You get your money from local clients, you put that money back into your business, which is then supporting other Maryland companies, which is the whole cycle. So sort of curious if you can talk about how that switch was made and what you might need, or what other businesses like yours might need to encourage that. And then the other question, related to procurement is, obviously you have a product that every one of our government offices can use, the university system. My committee on appropriations, we oversee the university system, and I'm perpetually frustrated that, we see contracts going to, when you look at a cafeteria, it's, McDonald's and, many large chains as opposed to small businesses. And so I'm just curious if you could, the second part is, do you get a leg up in procurement with local governments who need the coffee in their offices, or local entities, local government entities that might use you?
Great couple of questions. I will say regarding your first question on making our product as local as we can, we have about 3 different product lines, and the one that I was referring to is the cans that you would find in supermarkets. At the same time, the goal is to do the same thing with the other product lines, but some of those lines involve manufacturing processes that are elsewhere in terms of what we need for it, like a large number of compostable bags, for instance. But what we found was that through the process of, and I think this was also mentioned earlier, but what the government support enabled us to do was to think strategically for the next year in terms of how we were going to order our supplies, and to actually, in the case of our cans, we were able to actually bring the cost down earlier on, because we were saying, okay, we're going to order for 25,000 cans instead of just 1,400 at a time. And that enabled us a better contract. But then as well, it brought us to the point of saying, okay, how can we begin to think about who are our local producers and printers? And we're seeing that things are taking longer to get here. That was one of the keys as well, is can we start producing local where we don't have to bring something all the way across the country and then add an extra 5 days to the trip. And then, really what that did was it opened up the cash flow to be able to say, okay, we're going to buy this anyways. Can we get a better term as a result of having some more funds up front? So that was hugely beneficial, both in terms of being able to professionalize the look. For instance, our 2.2 pound bag, which is more of a food service bag for cafes and restaurants, we've been able to put something in there that has a branded look on it. It's much more attractive, but it enabled us to have that cash flow to be able to say, we're going to spend this anyways, let's make it look better rather than buying it piecemeal. Regarding getting into like universities and so forth, we've seen a trend where many universities are going to self-operation in their cafeterias. So some universities are moving away from some of the companies that we also try to work with as subcontractors, but then they decide, hey, we're going to run the cafeteria ourselves. We're going to manage it, and then that gives them more leeway in terms of how they choose who their providers are. We do have some contracts that we create with management companies that try to focus on, say, like sourcing within 100 miles or within 500 miles, and coffee is a different type of product because it comes from all over, but still being able to source from locally. So that's really finding those companies, like for instance, we work with the Bon Appetit company in some universities, and they put a preference on being able to say that they can source locally. But we've also been able to find that there are hospitals that are going into self-operation a little bit more, but it's a big decision that they make when they decide to do that and get away from a management company that's doing that. So we do have 1 or 2 customers as well that are providing coffee to some of the legislative functions that I know of, but it would be certainly helpful to us to figure out more mechanisms for being introduced. That's for sure.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I had a sneaking suspicion. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This has been a tremendously helpful and insightful discussion. I'm sure my colleagues may come up with new questions, but I am personally very curious about the business personal property tax issue. I've been researching on this for months. I think it's burdensome. Many other states don't have the kind of business personal property tax we have. The state of Maryland assesses, but it does not collect any. We have zero personal property tax, which is good, but the counties have that. Okay. First of all, I don't know why the state of Maryland is even in the business of assessing counties' personal property tax for businesses. Second of all, it's not evenly applied. It's an honor system, and I don't know which businesses are paying or not paying, and how to enforce that and all of that. So I'm wondering if you guys as small businesses pay business personal property tax, and if you find the process cumbersome.
Yeah, we do. And I would say I mean, in terms of paying it, I mean, you get a bill and you pay it. Of course, that part's not cumbersome. They make the paying easy, but the transparency, I think, is one of the biggest problems that I have is, what exactly is this for, and how do you then go about updating it? I mean, that's a non-transparent process, and the lack of staff that you were talking about earlier makes that a difficult process to change.
Okay, well, maybe we can have more follow-up on that subject, because I've spent a lot of time with my team looking into that and talking to county financial managers and leaders and all of that, and they're all over the map. So would love some insights from both of you later. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Happy to provide that. Yeah, love to.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on with the agenda. I didn't want to hurry up our first part of the discussion, which was amazingly helpful to all of us. All right, I'm going to turn it over to MCEDC's Chief Operating Officer, Bill Tompkins, our Executive Vice President as well, to give us some insights on both the economic development strategy and the grants administration. But I can assure you, Bill, that we are more interested in the last part of your discussion, which is how the grants distribution actually worked for small businesses. And so we can probably hurry up on the economic strategy part. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, a shout out to District 18, Delegate Solomon. We live about 6 or 8 blocks from each other. So this first presentation, I don't know why I'm doing it, because it's Delegate Chi who really knows this inside and out, and who is responsible to a large extent for the creation of MCEDC. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will zoom through this because the second part is much more interesting and relevant. And we also are going to have a little bit of help, because I'm going to also talk about one of the grant programs that Senator Kagan participated in. And we can share not only what we think, how it had an impact, but also lessons learned. But first, let's start with the comprehensive economic strategy. Basically, this is new to us, new to MCEDC, but the economic strategy is designed to make sure that we have business vitality, a plan that we're thinking job creation and enhancing the success of the entire county, but equally importantly, making sure that we are enhancing and expanding the tax base. And I think expanding the tax base is the one that probably has people most nervous. It's like, as we go forward, as we grow, how do we make sure that the tax base is robust enough to support the richness of the programs that we have in Montgomery County, and so that we can truly support an inclusive economy. This is basically how the legislation came to us. This is legislation. The plan has to be presented every 4 years and enacted by the county council, in this case, for the first time, the way we're doing it, no later than April 15th. So we have really been rushing since this legislation was passed earlier this year to work on the CES for the first time. And to clarify, this is on behalf of the entire county. This is not an MCEDC plan, but a plan that incorporates Montgomery Planning, incorporates the Department of Transportation, all the different components of what go into a, quote, true comprehensive economic strategy. There are certain statutory requirements, and this is right out of the legislation. So some of these words are subject to interpretation, but the important thing to remember is that housing is critical. And if we don't address the housing issues, then the plan is not going to be very successful. Transportation, equally important. Workforce development, which we'll hear a lot about. And then the last area, which most economic development organizations focus on is business development. There are specific metrics that are included in the legislation, and this is not unusual for most EDOs or most economic development organizations, especially around creating jobs, growing wages, and the attraction and retention of companies. There's a big debate about what's more important. They are both important, but I think we may have talked about this the last time. Retaining the businesses that are here have to be a priority because they're already here. They've already invested, and the opportunities for that money being recycled into the local economy is very important. While we do work on business attraction, it's more the visionary aspects of what we do. In many cases, businesses have already decided they're moving before we are aware of it. And then our job is to make sure that when they're looking in the DMV or Montgomery County, that we land them the best opportunities that we can here. The outcomes of the comprehensive economic strategy, very broad, but we're trying to better define them in terms of a diversified and thriving economy, racial equity and social justice, greater innovation, and very importantly, environmental sustainability, including a reduction in climate change. And as you're probably aware, as you are aware, Montgomery County has one of the more aggressive, robust climate action plans that you'll find in the country. So we're very proud of that. Good news, bad news. It requires a lot of investment, resources, and change to make that happen. And it means that we're all going to have to make changes in the way in which we do things, looking at the products we buy, looking at how businesses are outfitted and so forth. But it is incredibly important in today's world. I want to share what the recurring themes are, but I will jump to where you see small and minority businesses. Every organization that we interviewed, every Chamber of Commerce we interviewed, every whether it be Montgomery Planning, whether it be Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, there were themes that just kept coming up again and again and again. And obviously jobs, but related to jobs, how do you make sure that you have the correctly trained workforce to support the jobs that are out there? So even before you talk about job growth, and this was talked about in the panel earlier with Compost and Chesapeake Bay, access to talent is something that is very complex. It may be in today's world, you're competing with other companies who would never go after your employees before, who have different skill sets. And how do you match the skill sets of today with the jobs that are out there? And then how do you make sure that you're strengthening that pipeline such that you are creating the workforce for tomorrow? And can they keep up fast enough? So that's something that is drawing greater and greater attention in terms of the talent pipeline, and whether it is there, regardless of whether you have job growth or not, it's whether or not you can fill the positions that you have even today. And that's not just going to be pandemic related. I think the patterns will suggest that whether you're a small business or a large business, that the complexity of hiring and being able to run your business effectively are strained by the change in the labor market. Let me go down to why small and minority business strategies are on here. If you ask Montgomery County, what is our small business strategy? We would say, well, we're doing a lot of things, but we don't have a well-defined or clearly defined small business strategy for the county. And we don't have a clear one at MCEDC. You know, we focus on specific industries. We work quite a bit with small businesses, but what is our definition of a small business strategy? And I think part of the challenge there is that when you have 30,000 businesses here, the majority of which are small, we have to get our hands around what we mean by a small business strategy and what do we do to help. Is it communications? Is it resources? Is it access to capital? It always is, of course. Is it training? And then how do we decide how to focus both as a county government and MCEDC to say, this is how we think we can best handle small businesses. But the other issue here is that this is not just a county challenge. We're very fortunate that there are quite a few state resources and federal resources that support small businesses. And what we are doing is packaging everything that is available to help small businesses in areas where it's easy for businesses to find the information and easier for them to interpret how to use the information or interpret the guidelines that are there. When we go to the pandemic relief presentation, which follows, one of the themes that we're seeing is that it's fine to say, I have the tools to do something, but I don't have the staff to implement, or I don't have the, what was I going to say? I don't have the ability to market the product that I have. I have a great product, but I don't have the ability to market. I have the loan, but I don't know how to do the paperwork properly. I'm not filling out, even when it's dealing with taxes, I can't afford an accountant. And so it's not just government resources that are needed to make small businesses successful. We've got to put together that network of all kinds of resources that will support small businesses in good times and in bad. Procurement came up, and procurement is the hot topic. It's one thing, again, to have the legislation, which is very clear about procurement rules and set-asides or what you have to do. But we're finding more and more that businesses are telling us it's fine, again, to be on a list, but then how do I actually get a contract? And how do you expect even a county government that has billions of dollars in purchases to make sure that they have the list of products or services that relate to the small businesses that are out there that are providing them? And that's easier said than done. But I think the complaint I hear the most is that I'm on the procurement list, but I can't seem to get through. And so that's something that we are trying to work, again, with Ash Shetty on in terms of how that works, fluidity. He's done an incredible job of making the process much more transparent, just incredible strides in terms of what you can find in terms of information. But at the end of the day, people care about money in their pocket. And the question is, do I get a contract? Can I get a contract? And so that's where we're trying to spend more time to understand how one can unleash contracts. And then there can be a different approach to business. So if you take the landscaping business, Montgomery County hires a lot of landscapers to go cut all that grass and the bushes that are out there. But the question is, should you go to one or two or three large landscapers? Or when you're thinking about small businesses, even at your own homes, you know, there must be two or three landscapers in my neighborhood, very small businesses. Are they equally qualified to take on some of these county jobs? The answer is, of course they are, but it's not very efficient for the government to do that. So you have that trade-off between being able to help your businesses by giving them contracts and the efficiencies of running a government. I do want to talk about placemaking for a second. One size does not fit all. And when we develop county strategies, when you look at something like the agricultural reserve, their needs are so different from the rest of the county, both in terms of zoning, licensing, permitting, that fit an agricultural industrial economy relative to what's needed in downtown Bethesda. And that we have to be sensitive to that if we really want the ag reserve to grow. And we talked about breweries earlier. There are 10 wineries and breweries in the process of opening in Montgomery County over the next year or so. But their needs are different, as you were pointing out, and the way in which legislation applies to them or permitting or rules may be more complex or challenging if they're going to function and thrive the way in which breweries best survive. We're hearing more and more and talking more and more about the East County. Delegate Queen has been very active in bringing us into looking at what we can do and what's going to make that portion of our economy thrive. And it's very different from what you need in other parts of the county that may be thriving with a more diversified economy. So as we develop the comprehensive economic strategy, we are very sensitive to the fact that it's not just a Montgomery County strategy, it's a strategy for different types of businesses, different types of geographies, and that's just as important, especially if you want a truly inclusive economy where everybody has an opportunity or a seat at the table. I am going to skip through this. This is just the outline for how this CES will be put together. But I think it's very important for us to define our values as a county. And that's why we will have a healthy debate about what quality of life actually means, what it means to have civic capacity, to respond to opportunities, to let businesses come to you or come to the state, come to local jurisdictions in terms of helping to facilitate their needs as a business. Environmental sustainability, we talked about. What does racial equity and social justice mean in terms of why that is important to us? And so we're going to try to define that in terms of setting the stage about what makes Montgomery County tick before we get into specific strategies about, okay, here's how we grow the economy. And I think the thing that we have added here under goal A, if you look at the bottom of the slide, we are now focusing more on community wealth building. You know, it's fine to go after the Marriotts and to go after the large companies or the ones that are successful in life sciences. But unless you really look at community wealth building and entrepreneurs, smaller businesses, and then how they truly have access to capital and making sure that it happens, then you're really not going to see the economy tick the way in which it does, especially in one in which is diversifying as much as Montgomery County is.
Excuse me,
Other parts of, go ahead.
Bill,
Yes.
excuse me. I'm looking at the clock. I know, our colleagues and myself are very eager to learn about the grants distribution process. I want to make sure we have enough time for that and also have some more Q&A. And I know Senator Kagan is eager to chime in on some of the discussions we kind of didn't quite finish. So if you could just kind of rush through that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So the outline, if you were paying attention, you just saw me slip through the slides, but I think you're getting the guts of what it is we're trying to accomplish. And I think it is going to be a very robust plan. Let me take any questions for that, and then we can jump right into the pandemic relief funds.
Or to rush you, Bill, it's great content, and maybe it's worth presenting to the whole Montgomery County delegation. All of my colleagues need to hear about this strategic part of the discussion. But let me ask Senator Kagan to chime in here if she has any reflection or comment.
Thank you so much, Delegate Shea, but why don't we let Bill do the grants thing? And we asked for a 20-minute pushback. I didn't realize this was going to be an hour and a half. So, but I do want to share with colleagues some thoughts about the grants process.
Okay.
So,
All right. Okay.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm just switching presentations.
Thank you. Thank you for being flexible, Bill.
Not a
Appreciate it.
problem. Okay, share screen. Here we go. Okay, pandemic relief funds. Can you guys see this? As you know, if you go back to March of 2020, March 13th specifically, that's when all businesses started shutting down. We went back into the office on the 16th, had a board meeting, and we were done. And this was a very devastating impact to all businesses, but small businesses in particular, and things happened right away. Fortunately, many federal, state, and local programs started almost immediately, and I'm going to share with you a handful of the ones that we worked on, but also some of the ones that were presented by the county. MCEDC was involved in $22 million in direct grant assistance, including the nonprofit grant relief program, which Senator Kagan was instrumental in helping us think through. And when we get to that, we will talk about learnings and best practices and what we could have done differently, but also what impact we believe that that program had. There were over $87 million in funds that were distributed since the pandemic started in 2020 that are directly related to business assistance. And quite a diverse set of programs, from arts grants to micro enterprise programs to hotel relief programs, online sales, the FEG program, the Small Business Rental Assistance Program, a real diverse set of programs. And I'll start out by saying that as these programs started coming out, in terms of learnings right up front, they were coming so fast. Part of the question was, are we making sure that we're not just throwing money at a problem, but instead doing things with a very specific audience and with a level of intensity and focus such that these programs are really going to help? And at the time they were coming out so quickly, it wasn't worrying about, what is the payoff? It's like, a lifeline is needed. So I'm going to just walk through one or two or three of these and then open it up to both what we can do going forward, but also learnings from doing the programs. There are a couple of examples. The Small Business Rental Relief Grant Program, which was $1 million program that impacted about 1,000 businesses who received about a $10,000 grant or up to 3 months worth of rent. And this was an absolute lifesaver for small businesses who just had no money coming in. And this was not just restaurants, all kinds of businesses who had to shut down, or because of the domino effect of the business next door being closed, not being able to clean clothes or provide other services that you would normally do with a thriving business economy. The Telework Assistance Program, up to $2,500 in reimbursement grants for businesses for anything from computers to upgrading your internet system so that you could work from home. And this really impacted small businesses in a great way, in the sense that it's one thing to be at the office and have your be back in the a small office where you've got your computer, you've got all the things you need to run your business, and then suddenly you're at home and your internet service is not powerful enough, or you don't have a second computer, or you don't have a screen. So in this sense, this business was a quick fix, but we hit over, I think it was over 1,000 businesses through this program. The average payout was about $1,900. And it was one of the first ones that MCEDC did. Now, I will tell you, going back to one of the learnings, and I'm sure Senator Kagan will comment on this too, and this goes back to my comment earlier, I can call the kettle black because we were responsible for implementing legislation. And one of the things that I learned is you have to have consistency. You're making up rules on the fly. Are you truly vetting the process? Is it a solid process? Are you consistent with who can receive funds from this program? Are you fair in the sense that with all the people who are making decisions on the grants, does every type of upgrade qualify? All kinds of rules that we had to make up. And in this case, I'm pretty proud of this one because we had to turn this around in less than a week. We were told on a Wednesday that we were going to have to handle this program because in this case, the county did not have the resources to do it. We had never done anything like this. And a week later, we created the rules, we had the guidelines, we pulled our staff together without hiring anyone new, and we were live with this program. So I understand why, when I said earlier, you legislate, and I got the pushback, yes, but there is a feedback loop. But we really did have to figure out, are we doing it correctly? And are we following the legislation? In some cases, the legislation did have holes or was not clear. But as we went to future programs, we did go back and say, this time, make sure you include this particular wording in the next grant program. It will make a big difference and it will help.
Excuse
And
me, Bill.
Sure.
Could I interject and ask you to specifically highlight your grant distribution process for 501c3s, the nonprofits, because it was kind of unusual to have to distribute grants, in a rush to the nonprofits as if they were small businesses, but there were many of them were small employers.
Sure. Well, first of all, and I think Senator Kagan and I can do this together because we recruited her early on in the process. This one was one of the more difficult ones, but creative ones, because we were basically given a blank check, $3.3 million to distribute to whatever 501Cs we wanted to, whether it's C3, C6, et cetera. As long as you basically had that tax filing, it was up to us to create the rules and guidelines as to how we were going to distribute grants. So that is both the good news and the bad news. The state had already distributed, I believe it was $3 million in grants earlier in the year through a different program, and they did have very specific guidelines. And so we said, we haven't dealt with nonprofits to the degree that we have dealt with other types of businesses, but nonprofits are businesses. There are 7,000 nonprofits in Montgomery County. I would say maybe 2,000 of which are big enough to be recognized, that are active, that are filing 990s. And we thought that the target audience for this program was about 300. But we also, rightly or wrongly, wanted to make sure that we were tying the nonprofits who were eligible to economic development and job creation or moving the economy forward. And that is both subjective and objective. So we did have 4 criteria, but we also included organizations who were focused on STEM development, such that we were creating the workforce for the future. And I would say that it opened it up to allow lots of different nonprofits to apply. And the ones that we rejected up front were either rejected because they hadn't filed their 990s, or they didn't have the right any paperwork to demonstrate that they were a legitimate 501c3. But once you got past that, we looked at every application that came in. So why don't I turn it over to Senator Kagan, and we can talk about the experience and the questions she asked us as we were trying to put this together.
Thank you, Bill. And I'm so sorry. I am sharing the 11 o'clock Zoom that's in my Zoom room that I've pushed back twice now. So thank you for the indulgence. First off, I just have to say that MCEDC did a lot of amazing stuff and with limited resources and with all the best intentions. The challenges around this grant, first off, I think they got a lot of the right people in the room. I was delighted to be a part of it. They also recruited Leslie McDonald to be a judge, and she runs, as I'm sure many of you know, she's the head of Nonprofit Montgomery, and Dana Pauly, Leadership Montgomery, who used to be with the Community Foundation. I'm just like good folks. The challenges started, frankly, with DHCD, the Department of Housing and Economic Development and Community Development. They gave a pot of money, and as Bill indicated, $3.3 million, and said, give it out however you want. And the deadline's in 10 minutes. And it just kind of set up kind of for a disaster of how can you get that much money being given out fairly, prudently, transparently, in a way that's going to move the needle and make a difference. So I think the challenges started at the state level, and I think MCDC did the best they could and in trying to make this work. But the process didn't go the way that we might if we had it to do over again, I think. And I think the outcomes might have been different. So one of the feedback that I think that I'd have for this, Chair Chi and colleagues, is that if there's a future grants pot of money for nonprofits, I would suggest, and no disrespect to MCEDC, but giving it to the Community Foundation, to Nonprofit Montgomery, to even the Nonprofit Village. I mean, folks who know the players, know the process, and have done grant making for nonprofits would make more sense. And it would be, I think this process for $3.3 million, which is a small pot of money, I think for MCEDC, is a really big pot of money for nonprofits. And so I think it took a lot of time, a lot of bandwidth, and it was a learning curve that was steep. And so in the future, A, more time needed, B, more transparency and thoughtful process, C, kind of a different home base for which, where to base it. And the timetable was just crazy to make sure that everyone heard about it, that the application made sense, that we got the information. And as Bill indicated, there were groups that didn't have their 990s in, they didn't, they just weren't qualified. It was, Joe's soccer balls, and I mean, it was some of the groups that applied. If none of us knew about them, how credible are they? How active are they? Should we give them any money? Is it worth our time to investigate them further? I'm trying to be concise and I'm talking really fast just to try to give you guys a sense of it. So seriously well-intentioned, but seriously need to modify some stuff when and if there's another opportunity in the future. Bill, is that fair?
Yep. This is a good example of don't just throw money into the system.
Amen.
Was the least defined of all the ones we've done. And so it is a good example of what not to do. But we still did give out 108 grants. We got rid of the $3.3 million and to some really worthy causes.
Right. But the deadlines and the expectations from DHCD and then passed on by MCEDC, you have to be able to spend it right away. You have to have a contract right away. Some of that just could lead to really bad expenditures and bad grant making. And again, no ill intent, but get the money out there. Get rid of the money is kind of not the way that I would prefer to do grant making. And, if there's a group that's going to get $50,000, $100,000, that is like transformational for some of these groups. And so that's it. So thank you, Madam. And thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bill. I think for the remainder 7 minutes, I would like to hear from the two small businesses represented here about their grant receiving process, how it worked for them, and leave some time for my colleagues to ask some last minute questions. So Ben and Kevin, are you still around? Can you comment on that? And I'm going to mute myself because of the lawn mowing.
Sure, I can comment on. Can you hear me? Because I'm seeing my. Oh, sorry. The granting procedures was trying to, once I figured out how to get into the basically the Maryland economic development portals, just keeping up with what's coming through. I found our county officials very proactive in terms of making sure that not only did we know about what was coming up, but then now I just for the sake of letting everyone know, while I'm a Montgomery County resident and we have residents from Montgomery County, our main production facility is in Anne Arundel County. So we've received grants from Anne Arundel County, which mirrored much of what I was hearing Mr. Tompkins talk about $2,500 for us to help get some of our staff working from home. And that continues to be transformational for us because we still have some staff working from home who only have to come in once a week. And that's been helpful in their personal life because we've had some babies being born in the process as well. And so as a small company that isn't able to provide the benefits that a much larger company would provide, being able to work from home has been crucial for them. And it's actually helped us to save some of our staff who in the past I've lost during these moments of life changes. And but the grant procedures, we've actually reported on the first of our grants that we received for the purpose of bringing in technology, enabling people to move home, bringing in protective equipment. And that was a very smooth process as long as we kept track of all of the expenditures. That's already been approved and gone through.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Thank you, Kevin. Ben, how about you?
So are you speaking only about the county grant, or are you talking about state as well?
The state, yeah. Well, even though this is Montgomery County's Economic Development Committee, but we legislate not based on counties most of the time. We're
Yeah.
state leaders, so.
Yeah, so we received funds from the federal government. Like I mentioned, Maryland State, we got the loan that was converted to a grant. We actually didn't qualify for funds from the county level. I don't remember exactly why, whether the size or I think maybe our revenue wasn't hit as hard as some of the businesses that they were targeting. The state process, I mean, it went pretty smoothly from what I recall. I mean, the applications, like any bank application, can be a little bit overwhelming if you don't have your docs in order, but we did. And then, you know, got a check in the mail. I mean, I think it took a little bit of time, but what can you expect under the crazy conditions? And then we were really excited when it was converted to a grant. But I think for some of these programs, you know, if a lot of small businesses, or many small businesses may not have the time or ability or know-how to know where to look for some of these things. So proactive outreach is certainly important when these new programs are being established. I mean, I was looking for opportunities every day. I was looking through the different agencies, but some may not know how to do that or to do that in the first place.
Great, thank you. To my colleagues, do you have some last minute questions before we finish the briefing? I know we always try to share a lot of information, and I agree with Senator Kagan. This whole grants process, you know, we put a tremendous burden and learning curve on a fairly new organization, MCDC, which was not set up to do that. So that's a learning curve for the rest of us to how to do it properly. Which is why we're having such briefings to learn how we can improve. So let me see if I have any hands. Any other comments or questions? This has been very helpful to me, at least. Any of my other colleagues have any thoughts? Okay.
Thanks for hosting this.
Yeah. Hopefully we can bring back some new ideas, and you know, if the business executives like to reach out to any of us, other ideas and thoughts, we are more than happy to help, as always. And first of all, just want to say thank you for doing business in Montgomery County. We are always very grateful for your revenue generating, job creating machines that keep us, our community going. We hope you will grow to be mid-sized and super and global businesses who can export coffee made in Montgomery County and Maryland and all of that, relying on global, local supply chain going global, the other way around. You know, that's our dream for all of you. So whatever we can do in the process to remove barriers, would be wonderful. I actually do have a question that I didn't have time to ask earlier to the businesses. Are you, any of you, B Corps? Because you're also the kind of do-gooder businesses. Have you considered being a B Corp?
In the application process. So we have enough points. We're just going through and making sure that we can document it all. I mean, that's the big, you can be a business that is well-intentioned and doing all the right things, but if you're not documenting it properly, then you may not get the certification.
Great, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah, I would echo that. We're probably 2 steps behind Ben. I'm in the process of both looking at our carbon footprint and documenting every change that we're making. So that this year, for instance, was the first year we put out a sustainability report on our website, which for me was a point of pride to say we've finally been able to put out there that how can we say we're giving back at least 2%, which is our goal.
Great. Thank you so much. You really set excellent examples of how to do business in the modern days, you know. So Thank you all for taking the time to join us, and thank you, Bill, for your hard work, for stepping up to help our small business, and Gigi and Brian for your hard work of putting this panel together. All right, everybody have a great rest of the week, and wish you all an early Thanksgiving.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you again.
You.
Thanks, everybody.